Hello, everybody. My name's James. Welcome back to Planet FPL Correspondent Week on episode 2. They tried to take him away from us, but I wouldn't let it happen. It's our Nottingham Forest correspondent. It's Mark Sutherns. How are you, Mark?
I'm good. Season four. Who would have thought it
Yes.
when I started this that I'd get to season four? So first of all, I'm going to start on a positive note. I'm absolutely delighted to be here again and doing another correspondent season.
Well, I presume there'd be a season 5 as well. Although, judging by some of our off-camera discussion beforehand,
Nah.
Mark's got some concerns about Forest going into the season. But is there one place I've got to start with you, mate, as the Tottenham fan? Morgan Gibbs-White. I mean, you've done me over here,
Yeah.
mate.
I don't know. I mean, will we ever find out what happened there?
Probably not.
I mean, it's wide open for speculation because of the nature of what happened. There's all kinds of theories you can throw around, can't you? What I didn't like very much, and I know a lot of Forest fans did like it, was Marinakis on his shoulder and this kind of at the end of the day we always win. I just think that kind of posturing and flexing was a bit too much, and perhaps typical of what we've seen from Marinakis, who likes to put himself front and centre. And of course, we've got to give him, as Forest fans, massive credit for making sure that Gibbs White is a Forest player this season. And I'm hugely grateful because I think we'd have been in a lot of trouble had we lost him because of the time it would have taken to get a replacement and the disruption that would have caused. But I think I'm probably one of the few who's going, well, how did we even get to that point? How did negotiations for the contract with Gibbs White get to a point where him and his agent felt he had to get down the road to Spurs to get to a position where we offered him a contract to get him to stay, which seems to be what happened. But then you've got all the legal stuff in there, and how much of a role did that play? I don't really want to get into that, but you can speculate that perhaps the threat of legal action was a factor as well. So fantastically positive from a Forest perspective in terms of keeping him. A little bit dubious in the way it happened for me.
When the news broke, it was obviously straight after Elanga had confirmed move
Yeah,
to Newcastle as well. It felt like, from my perspective, Tottenham got their timing badly wrong. Whether they got the information from player, agent,
yeah.
obviously they found out about this release clause. These release clauses seem quite complicated at the moment. We think there's certain aspects of the release clause that weren't met by Tottenham, i.e., if it was in writing that they had to speak to Forest first, and certain things about it that all seemed a little bit weird. It's kind of widely reported that we think that Gibbs White did want to go to Tottenham. At
Mm.
that point, what was your thought process? Because I saw a lot of kind of mixed views from Forest fans in terms of, right, let him go. He's betrayed the club, and also others going, well, he's a key player. If we can keep hold of him, we obviously want to. How did you feel at that moment when the news broke very suddenly that he was going to go?
I was in a complete tailspin. I was all over the shop because for me, it would have been disastrous to lose him. And I was like most Forest fans, thinking it was inevitable because the release clause was being talked about. And when I saw us contesting it on the legal front, I thought, what are we doing? We're just wasting our time because he's surely going to go. And I think 99% of people felt that. I wasn't like slagging him off because I think and even Elanga going to Newcastle and the team breaking up a little bit, it was a reality check for me that, at the end of the day, Forest are a stage and players have got careers and we gave them a stage to perform and they feel for their career they need to move on. And whatever it is in terms of pay structure, the platform to play in Champions League or whatever, Gibbs White felt that Spurs could give him what he wanted in terms of a salary in that stage. And you can argue about, Spurs came below us in the table and all that nonsense. But, there's no question Spurs, in terms of their facilities, what they've got, their reputation, they are a big club. So I understood why Gibbs White would want to go. I didn't understand how we got to a point where he was, in a car to London. Like, if we were negotiating a contract with him for months, which what I'm led to believe we were trying to keep him, and we knew that clause was there, we must have known there was a risk that someone would come in and meet it. Now, if Spurs had come in on 62 and a half, what would have happened then? The move might have happened. And had they structured the deal in the right way, the move might have happened. So we could have lost him. And for me, that would have been, I was thinking we were relegation candidates had we lost Gibbs White, because I think
Wow.
that the time it would take for us to replace him and the output we lost with Elanga and Gibbs White, 32 goal involvements, you can't go out and get those kind of players to replace that output immediately. It's going to take weeks and months maybe to find those players, and then weeks and months for those players to settle into Nuno's system and the way we play, because we play in a certain way. And Gibbs-White and Elanga are absolutely key components of the way we play. So finding people to slot in and do that, I thought would be difficult. And I thought, yeah, we're facing a season in the bottom six here for sure. If Gibbs-White had left, so I was hugely relieved. But yeah, it was all a bit of an odd situation. I don't know how we got there.
I mean, it's well documented that I'm gutted. I wanted him. I was asked a question about a number of players linked with Tottenham, and I actually came out with the name Morgan Gibbs-White. And then the
Mm.
news broke a few days later. So very disappointed from my perspective. I think he's a top player. He's a needle mover, mate. I think he'll be
He is.
pushing towards even potentially starting for England next summer. I think he's a top player. Is there any danger in what's happened that other players who might think of joining Forest think twice? I'll give you an example. What I mean by that is so that Bournemouth had their defence rips apart,
Mm.
big money for big defenders going. But it does add into the idea of people can look at a club like Bournemouth from a career progression and know that if they go to a club like that, perform well, and then another kind of next level player in the food chain comes looking for them, Bournemouth won't necessarily stand in their way. Players may look at Forest now and think, well, I might go there, and that's a great stepping stone in my career, but I might get stuck there. Is there any danger of that, or off the
Maybe.
back of what's happened?
Yeah, maybe. I think that's what Marinakis is trying to do. And obviously, a lot of Forest fans absolutely love that and go, yeah, we're not a selling club. We can't be a selling club. I mean, I don't know if that's fact. I don't know if out of this Gibbs White situation, it's a demonstration that we're not a selling club. Because for all we know, the legalities of it were a factor in convincing him to stay. We don't know. If we were trying to get him a contract before and he didn't agree with it, what did we put in front of him? On the eve of the Spurs move that suddenly convinced him to stay. Nobody will ever know that. If it was more money, then why didn't we offer them more money before if we valued the player so highly? There's so many questions. So Marinakis is like, came out and postured and, at the end of the day, we always win and that stuff. It's like, oh, okay. Obviously, I'd love us to be in a situation where we're a top six, top eight team and not a selling club. But we were just about to see Newcastle lose Isak to Liverpool, for God's sake. So even then, I would say Newcastle are at a higher status in the food chain than Forest at the moment. They're going to lose their star player possibly to Liverpool. So, we don't know if that's going to happen, but it's looking likely. It's looking likely he's going to leave that club. So I think you have to have a sense of reality as a football supporter that there is a food chain, and I want to stay grounded about where Forest are in that.
But you've spoke to us several times about Marinakis and not wanting to stand still. And I mean, it must be a
Mm.
positive that you've got a chairman who's obviously really ambitious. I
Yeah,
don't mind him from the perspective of he's always looking for what he believes is the best thing for Nottingham Forest. And I think like you should take credit in that and positivity in it. The bit that irks people on the outside is things like it's the statement intent from Evangelos Marinakis that Morgan gives. Why isn't it a statement intent from the football club rather than you putting your name and almost ego to it?
yeah, that's the thing. That's what is a little bit distasteful for me. I mean, there'll be some, tub thumping Forest fans will absolutely love it, but I kind of look at it and go, is that should be the role of the owner? Should be his front and center of his ears. I guess that is a byproduct of the positive things that he brings. If we're going to want his money, his backing, his ambition, then we deal with that, and that's okay. I can live with it, but it's very typical, and it's what we've seen, and probably what we'll continue to see. Um, and it's great if he really does continue to back up his words with us making positive, ambitious moves in the market, strengthening, being a club that's equipped to play in Europe and compete in the top 10 in the Premier League, then I'm all for it. Sadly, so far, I don't see evidence of that yet. It hasn't happened. The words are there, the ambition is there, and I've got to trust that the actions are being taken to get us to that point. But we're behind what I would perceive the plan at the moment in terms of being equipped to take on European football plus compete in the top 10. So I'm reserving judgment yet. Everything he says encourages me as a Forest fan. Of course it does. Some of his behaviour makes me go, okay, maybe not, but I'll tolerate it. But really, actions speak louder than words. Let's see the players of high calibre come into the club because at the moment that hasn't happened to the degree we need.
Well, you've obviously got European involvement and you deserve mass congratulations for obviously qualifying for that. Had you been in the Conference League, Mark, where you should be, then you wouldn't have needed to obviously delve into quite as much strength in depth as what perhaps the Europa League might need to take on. Have you shafted Crystal Palace here, mate?
Well, I mean, You said this to us, didn't you? You said, well, if you get the confidence, you could put out a second string 11 and do all right and
Without doubt.
get to the business end, and then you can think about it, you know. And you're absolutely right. I think with the Europa League, it's a different proposition. You can't take that lightly. If you want to progress, you've got to put a decent level team out on a Thursday night. Have we shafted Palace? Palace broke the rules, didn't they? That's the trouble. You know, I don't really want to get into a situation where it's Forest who have been the kind of factor in getting Palace taken out of that tournament and relegated to the conference. I don't really think that is the case. Obviously, we believe that Forest had some kind of interaction with UEFA in terms of the letters that were written or whatever. So we don't know what the contents of those letters are. You can make assumptions. And perhaps Marinakis has said things and stuff has been said behind the scenes, maybe. But at the end of the day, Palace appear to have broken the rules that were in place at the time. And because of that, then the punishment probably is justified, I think. It's whether the ruling is right and whether that is unjust, that's a very different argument. And I'm sympathetic to that for sure. But the fact is, just like we were, you know, with the PSR situation for Forest, we broke the rules. The Brennan Johnson money didn't come in time. You can argue that was unjust, but we lost the points. And it's the same here with Palace. You can argue it was unjust, but I think they're going to get, you know, sadly for them, they're going to get punished and be taken out of the Europa League.
I think you're right. I don't think Palace's appeal is going to come to fruition. I think you'll hear later today, Rory McLaughlin-Dowd's probably going to agree with that as well. But they could win the appeal, and very suddenly you could be back in the Conference League at extremely short notice. With obviously games played between game weeks 1 and 3 in
Yeah,
terms of playoff games. I wonder as well, Mark, if that's potentially some of the reason for the delay here
yeah, it
in
could
terms of
be.
potential transfers. Like, what competition are we in? How much do we need to do? And I think
Yeah,
Rory's going to say that's been a factor on Palace's
yeah. I mean,
summer as well.
Palace have been slow in the market as well, haven't they? And yeah, I think the two factors that in my head I'm thinking have affected our activity in the market has been the kind of lack of certainty on what tournament we're in European wise and when those fixtures come and the level of player we'd need to recruit, but also the Gibbs-White situation, which I think for one reason or another just didn't just put me in a tailspin. I think it put the club in a tailspin as well. Marinakis and others had to get involved to quickly resolve that in our favour. And I'm very grateful we did, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's put some other aspects of our activity in the summer, put that back. And we saw Marinakis getting involved in the deal to get Ndoye over the line. So it's obvious that in some cases we're having to wheel out the big man to get the deals done. So when he's feverishly involved in the Gibbs White situation, that's probably held us back. Yeah, and what level of play do we need for conference and Europa League? What I will say there is, though, I think that we're unlikely to go out and recruit too many players that are going to strengthen the first 11. I think the type of player we're recruiting is depth. And I would argue you need that depth whether you're in the Europa League or the conference. So I don't know how much that would have slowed our activity, to be honest.
Well, arguably, you'd need the depth anyway for the Premier League if suddenly you
Yeah.
suffered an injury crisis.
Yeah. We got away with injuries last season.
Yeah. Is there any likelihood of an evolution in terms of tactics from Forest this forthcoming season? It's obviously well documented. You were quite happy without the ball last season, worked very much well for you. But an evolution of Forest and wanting to progress and push on again, could we foresee an evolution?
I think it's inevitable to some extent. It's another reason why I think maybe the club's targets in the transfer market haven't been met because I think that there are some levels of player who look at the way we play and go, "Nah, that's not for me." You know, players like McAtee and Harvey Elliott who want the ball, who want to showcase their talents, who are first and foremost perhaps attacking players want to play in a team that has the ball, has possession, and gives them opportunities to show their talents, right? So if players like that are our targets, we're going to have to evolve because we're not going to attract that player to the club in the way we play at the moment. You know, the Gibbs White and Elanga are quite unique in that their game is suited to the way we play. Gibbs White is willing to put the yards in, put the graft in, and he's tenacious and he's got that energy going back as well as going forward. What we lack with Gibbs White is perhaps the output going forward, as we've seen. Whereas you look at Harvey Elliott and you look at McAtee, for example, I think they're players who look over their shoulder about running back and think, no, I think I'll stay up here where I can make the difference. And we're not going to trap that player playing the way Nuno does primarily. We've got to have more strings to our bow. And the second thing I say is that, the end of last season when teams figured us out, I don't know how much of that was the case, but certainly when we went behind in games, we were kind of lost for ideas. We were looking to Elanga's pace when teams were defending deep and he couldn't get behind. Gibbs-White was perhaps not at the top of his form for one reason or another. Maybe he was distracted by what was coming. And we then struggle to break teams down. So we have to have a different way of playing so we can adapt our tactics to match state or to opposition.
That creates danger, doesn't it? Change, trying to be more ball possession orientated.
Yeah, different types of players. We're probably going to talk about Chris Wood, and I think that Chris Wood works well in the way we play at the moment. But if we're going to be possession based, if we're going to be, creating opportunities where it's all about movement and doing more with the ball, running channels and pulling opponents around, Chris Wood isn't that player. Chris Wood is a player who sits in the, I say penalty box, almost the 6 yard box and waits for service, right? He doesn't really contribute outside of the penalty area. He doesn't contribute to build up. His movement's not a strength of his. I don't think if we're going to play a possession-based game where we're trying to break an opponent down, Chris Wood is in that first 11 in that instance. I think that's why Jesus has been brought in, because he's much more equipped to do that kind of thing. So I think it's going to be disruptive to our thinking in terms of what is Nuno's first 11 in some situations. I think Chris Wood starts the season, and I think we start the season playing the way we did last year. But I do think we're trying to evolve that, and that will mean different starting 11s and different setups.
Any concern from these pre-season results?
Yeah.
At time recording, you've played 5 games and scored 1 goal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not surprised me because it's not been a summer that's gone to plan, has it? I think that Nuno would have expected to have 4 or 5 new players in, settled, and able to have them at his disposal for this round of friendly fixtures, and he hasn't. We'll be very fortunate to get another player in before we play our last 2 friendlies, because we've only got a couple left in a couple of weeks. We could get 3 or 4 in that window, but it's unlikely, and it's unlikely they're going to get thrown into those friendly games. So at the moment, the only new player he's got is Ndoye, Jesus and Cunha. And I think that you could argue that we should have had Jesus in January because we needed a third striker then. You can argue that Ndoye is there to replace Elanga. Well, there's no argument he is. So we haven't really given him, I don't think, additional strength to the level that he needed to give us the platform for the season in these friendlies. So I'm not surprised that we've struggled for results and performances so far.
You spoke about Elanga and Ndoye. Firstly, on Elanga, how much of a blow is it? Or does it speak about that evolution a little bit? And how do you think he'll get on at Newcastle?
Massive blow, first of all, because he's a unique talent, someone who possesses that raw pace, but also has the composure to find finishes and assists. Is very, very difficult. And I think it's ironic that we've been linked with Adama Traore, which is kind of like the archetype of that player in terms of raw pace, but certainly not competing with Elanga in terms of output. And it's very interesting that Traore is a target. I don't mind it as an impact sub, but that tells you that we're probably not going to be a massive departure from the way we're going to play initially, because we're looking for like as best we can. And Traore is probably the only player around who can compete with Elanga for raw pace travelling with the ball. So it's a massive blow to lose him, because Ndoye, he's going to need time. He's going to need time to adjust to our game, the Premier League game, Premier League defenders, Nuno's tactics. That's going to take him weeks, possibly months, and he's only just arrived. So we needed that player in quickly, and it didn't happen. It did happen though. I like Ndoye as a player. I think his ceiling could be higher than Elanga's. I think he's a better technically a better player who gives us more in terms of breaking down an opponent. Doesn't give us as much getting behind and perhaps on the counter attack. But I think for the evolution of Forest, I think Ndoye is a great signing, and he'll be really good for us. But we need to give him time, and so I think that losing Elanga initially is going to be a massive blow to what we see on the pitch for Forest. How we do at Newcastle, I think he'll do very well. I just think he's evolving as a player to be much more mature in his outlook, and his output has been fantastic. He's a player who you can tell really wants to learn and get better. He's got that attitude, and under Eddie Howe, I think he'll flourish even further.
7 million of interest.
What's that?
Elanga.
Elanga in FPL, of course.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're switching to FPL.
You know that thing we talk about quite a bit, Mark.
Yeah. difficult, isn't it? Because obviously the Isak disruption and what effect will that have? I think if Isak was sitting there in the front line with him, then absolutely 7 million's worth a look. Good value at that price. Newcastle got tough start to the season, though, from what I gather. So I think that puts me off initially. So I think he's a wait and see, but there's no question that at that price he can offer real value in FPL. Yeah.
On Ndoye, I said on Friday's podcast that I thought he'd get placed in at the 6.5 bracket. He's come in at 6. That alerted my attention straight away. Then I went
Mm.
a double look at his attacking returns, and it wasn't as high as I thought it would be.
Mm.
Does he interest at 6 versus say Callum Hudson-Odoi at the same price?
I think second half of the season definitely. I think at some point Ndoye is going to look a bargain. I don't think it's going to be in the first 6 weeks because I think we've got to give him time. But I think that Nuno's a manager will get the most out of him, and we've got to believe that Nuno was behind targeting Ndoye because the kind of player he is. He works hard. He defends. He can go inside and outside. He's got the ability to score goals and play even centrally if we need it, which we were doing with Elanga for a bit as well. So he ticks a lot of boxes apart from that raw pace, explosive pace that Elanga's got. He's got good pace, he's got good acceleration on the turn, but not to the same level. But even so, he'll do that job for us. So I've got to think he's a Nuno player. I don't look at it and think, oh, that's a signing that a recruitment team have put together without consulting the manager. So I think he will settle, and I think he will be good value at 6 million eventually, but not yet.
And Hudson-Odoi from the start? Is that a no, is it?
Uh, yeah, I think so because I mean I've got to caveat this with I'm a FPL manager who's very biased against my own team, if you know what I mean. It's like the first season Forest came up, I was giddy. I was like, oh yeah, I'm getting Brennan Johnson, and I was right behind that, and I kind of paid the price for not backing against my team because I didn't go Haaland against Forest because I didn't want to have Haaland in my team against my team, and he goes and gets a hat trick and people captain him. So I was very much biased towards Forest in the first season. Then after that, I changed my tact, and I have been since, which is I'm going to play down the value that Forest can give in FBL. And last season that really hurt me because we did so well, and I didn't see our defence and the likes of Elanga and Wood deliver to the level that they did. So you've got to caveat everything I say with, well, Mark's a little bit, 10 to 15% down on what Forest can offer. So I'm going to say again, Hudson-Odoi, I think will play a bigger role this season for us because he's going to need to, and I think he will step up. His future's not absolutely certain, by the way. His contract's still an issue for us. So I do think that he could offer some value. I think Ndoye's got the highest ceiling of the two, though. So I would say that by the time we're considering Forest in attacking terms, which will probably be after the first month or so, I think it'll be Ndoye we look at.
Gibbs-White 1.5 more on top of those two.
Mm,
Feels a little pricey.
yeah, I think that's a little bit much, to be honest. But he's got to have a big season, obviously with a big international tournament to come this season, following the season. So this has got to be the season where he stakes that claim for that England role, and whether it's in the start 11. But he's definitely got to be looking at it going, I've got to be in that squad, and that's not a given. So I think he's going to have a big season. I think he is going to kick on, and it might be that he gets some way to justifying that price. But I think a little bit pricey for me, given the fact that Forest are bedding down, and it's a transitional period for us.
Okay, we're crossing people off the watch list here. A bit more FPL assets in a bit. But you'd mentioned about potential incomings. What do you want? I mean, wide players seems to be a real theme at the moment, like you said, linking with people like Adama Traore. When you talk about the squad needing depth, where does it need it? Is it everywhere?
Yeah, I think it more or less is. We need a reserve keeper because I don't think Miguel's good enough. We need at least one fullback who can allow us to rest Aina and
Hold on,
Williams.
hold on. You're not after another keeper, Mark, are you? Surely.
Oh, I was standing for Sels. There's no question. Sels is. I think Sels is going to have another great season, and we're going to need him to have one. So I don't have any doubts about Sels as a starter. He's proved me completely wrong. So I'm more than willing to put my hands up and say I was wrong on that front. Although, in my defence, he did transform from being a solid keeper to being an outstanding top six keeper last season. What was behind that? I don't know. Was it Nuno who was a keeper? The coaching? Was it Milenkovic and the surety he bought? Something transformed Sels and took him up a level like season. I think we all saw that, and I'm grateful for it. And I think he's a great keeper. But we need a backup that we can't play him week in, week out, Thursday, Sunday, in my opinion. So fullback, yeah, we need someone who can play left and right. Someone like Jed Spence would have been lovely, but sadly you've realised what a good player he is, so Spurs aren't letting him go now. Someone like that, though, is what we need, who can play either side, who can give us back up there. Centre backs, we're fine. We still need a six. Don't think Sangare is the answer. So, I very much want Douglas Luiz at the club if that's still a target. I think he's the kind of player we need. And if we're led to believe Nuno thinks the same, I think we need another midfielder in there as well as Douglas Luiz if we get him. So we need a six, another midfielder. We need probably another wide player. Well, we do need another wide player to give us a bit more ability to rotate Ndoye and Hudson-Odoi. So I would say it's at least 4 or 5 players. I'd like more than that though.
Okay. Fixtures. Like them?
Yeah, it's a good start.
Mm.
There's no question about that. In a way though, that worries me a little bit in that, come game weeks 5 and 6, we're playing Burnley and Sunderland, and our supporters will be looking at that going, oh, well, that's 6 points there. Good start to the season. But we're playing those fixtures at a time when Forest aren't going to be at their best. I don't think we're going to see Forest clicking as a team, as a unit, and probably till October, November. I think that's when Nuno will probably be able to get the team settled in the system and the way he wants to play, and the new players that are coming in will have had that time to adjust. In the first 6 weeks, it's a big task to get Nuno, if we are going to evolve the way we play, to get that absolutely right in time to face these games. We should still get some results. Like we should. I think we will get something against Brentford because of where they're at, right? I think we'll get something against West Ham because West Ham haven't taken strides. They've lost Kudos. They haven't added players. Like many teams haven't been able to add players in the window. So I think there's every chance we can win those 2 home games. But I do look at Burnley and Sunderland and think they're banana skins. And the expectation, I think, is what's worrying me about the Forest situation this season. The expectation will be, well, we're top 10. We should, they should bounce off us, those teams. I mean, it's 6 points. But I don't think we've immediately gone from being a team that's, fighting for survival to being a top 10 team. I think the transition from that one spot to the other is longer. Last season, we overachieved. I think our reality is we're a team which is probably lower bottom half and we're pushing up. So I don't think we can look at the fixtures and be complacent and think those points are a gimme, because I think we overachieved last season. It's simple as that.
Well, I suppose there's influences on some of the results towards the end of the season, right? Like the 2-2
Yeah,
with Leicester as an example.
exactly.
You took 8 points from your last 8 games. Are you more kind of looking at through that lens rather than the team that qualified for Europe?
I don't think we're in that situation. I think that was pure fatigue and the fact that the squad didn't have enough depth and we had to play the same 11 and we got some injuries at the end. We were lucky with injuries most of the season until the end when we did lose Murillo, we did lose Chris Wood, we did lose Hudson-Odoi. So we lost key players at the wrong time there, and also fatigue set in. And you can say that maybe teams worked us out. There's many factors, right? I don't think we're going to start the season to the extent where we're absolutely shattered and look really leggy and short of ideas. Having said that, I do think it will take time for us to get to a point where we're able to create chances, of a decent volume to win football matches. I think we're going to start the season being a very solid team that's hard to break down, who will probably win and lose games 1-0.
Okay. So that bodes potentially well for some of the defensive players. Top partnership last year with Murillo and Milenkovic. I think commonly when teams do well, they get these little price bumps in FPL. If you'd have said to me a month ago, 5.5 for those 2, I'd have definitely been overlooking. But we've got these DEFCONs, Mark. All right, tell me which one of the 2, or are they too much?
Yeah, I think they're well priced. I think defensive contributions will work well for the Forest defence. In fact, a lot of Forest players do well out of it. Elliot Anderson's another one. So I think that our defence is where, if you're going to invest in Forest, it's definitely the defence for me, because I do think Nuno will quickly identify that the attacking side of our game isn't settled, it isn't fluid yet. So we will have to base our performances, which arguably we do anyway, on that strong defensive platform. And I think that's how we'll start the season. Like I say, we will win 1-0 and we'll probably lose 1-0 in games. And so I think that one Forest defender will probably be the limit of my investment in Forest. Where it will go though is very difficult because what Defcon does is it brings all elements of that defence up to a same level. Murillo, yes, is an absolute monster for Defcon, but Milenkovic does enough to keep pace with him when you add in the fact that he's probably got the bigger goal threat. So very close between those two. And then you've got Williams, who for tackles does very well. You know, he's amongst the top 3 or 4 fullbacks for tackles. Therefore, he's going to be no slouch for Defcon. But he doesn't have perhaps the attacking finesse that Aina has in the final third. Aina probably offers that little bit more in the final third. So the balance across the Forest defence when it comes to FPL is really nice, but gives us a dilemma. My answer would be just go Sels, because I think Sels. Well, I think it is, because I don't think you want to overinvest and have 2 Forest defenders. But what Sels gives you is a goalkeeper at 5 million, I think, who will get save points, because I think there's going to be quite. I think the from my gather what the ball is like as well this season. It's a Puma ball and it looks quite light. I think teams are going to be shooting from range quite a bit. I think keepers are going to get a few save points just from long shots initially as teams get used to that ball and pinging long. And I think Sales is going to get save points anyway. Plus, I think we'll pick up clean sheets in games where perhaps we don't expect it. You know, we could go to Arsenal and Newcastle in the first 7 and we will put men behind the ball in those games, and you know we could come out with 0-0. So I think Sales is where I'm going, but it's very, very close between the back 4.
If you had to go Milenkovic or Murillo, one or the other?
I think I'd go Murillo.
Okay. So you would believe in the Defcons rather than a little
I
bit
think
more
I
of,
would just about, yeah, because I think the Murillo could get a few more attacking returns this season.
okay. Because we always say upside in terms of the attacking stuff, right? But is the upside the other way round now in terms of the consistency? And I guess one difference would be with these two, maybe if you went Murillo, I guess we need to be influenced now. Those who do really well for Defcons, we need to look at longer term picks, right? Because of their consistency and their ability to keep racking them up over and over. If Milenkovic is suddenly no longer a threat from set plays, it might be more one you want
Yeah,
to move on. Is that right?
yeah, I think so. I think relying on set play goals with a defender is very difficult. Ivanovic was probably the last defender I can remember who you think, well, he's going to get 7 or 8 over the season. Right? I don't think Milenkovic is going to do that. So will he get 5 again? I don't know. I think Murillo is nailed on to get around 40 defcon over the season though, because he's just a ball magnet and puts himself in the way of opponents and the ball. And so I think that makes me think I'll go Murillo if I was picking a Forest defender. And I think he will up his game in terms of output going forward as well. Like when is that world-class goal? When is that 30-yarder going to come? When is that goal going to come where he beats 3 players and then tucks it through the keeper's legs? Maybe it's this season he does that goal where it's, goal of the month or whatever. It's coming because, you've seen firsthand what he likes to take it on. So
I mean, he scored from White Hart Lane from 80 yards nearly.
yeah, exactly. So something like that's coming this season, and he's not going to stop doing that. When he bursts out of defence with the ball, having intercepted a pass, in his head, he's thinking, "I'm going to go all the way here." That's how he thinks. So that makes me want to pick him over Milenkovic.
Okay. It's neither of them currently in my FPL draft at the moment, Mark. It's Nico Williams.
Yeah, I like it because of the tackles, and he could up his attacking game as well.
Yeah, his volume in terms of ball winning, the tackle element of it is really good. It'd be one of the strongest in terms of fullbacks in the league.
Yeah.
So I personally prefer him over Aina. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I think so because you're again you're banking on attacker and turns being stronger for Aina, I think,
Okay.
which you can't.
Is there any concern in terms of the fitness of the 2 fullbacks at the moment?
No, I think Nico in particular is one of the fittest fullbacks around. I think,
No, I mean, in terms of their availability for game week 1, in terms of are they
yeah,
carrying problems?
possibly. I think he was on the bench like yesterday. I think he'll start. I mean, I don't think there's any issue. I think we have to bring in someone to give them the rests in midweek. I don't think we can play them Thursday, Sunday by any means. I think I think they're both, barring obviously any injury that we can't foresee. I think they're both fine. I think they're going to play week in, week out in the Premier League for sure.
There's no doubt that these 4 are the first choice back 4, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's the strength of Forest is that for all the kind of concern that I've got about how we'll start the season, the one thing that I look at and take comfort is the back five are absolutely rock solid and amongst the best back five in the Premier League. And there's no question marks over any of them in terms of starting and their level of performance. I think they're going to be as good as last season.
Could we be in for more Premier League rotation now? I mean, what's the impact of, say, a new signing, someone like Jair Cunha, who, by the way, him and Milenkovic coming up from corners might be quite interesting if they ever both play centre back together.
Yeah, I think the question mark will be on will we ever go free at the back, and then will we sign somebody to back up Williams and Aina who's a bit more attacking? Because we saw Nuno, we dabbled with Nuno Tavares for a bit last season or previous seasons on loan, and I know he likes that fullback who offers more going forward than going than being a defender. So it could be that we make a wing back signing, and that gives us the option to then go free at the back and play Jarcuna, which I think we will do away from home on occasions. Like when we go to Arsenal game week 4, I wouldn't be surprised if we play free at the back there. And then I don't know whether the personnel change at fullback. It depends who we bring in, but certainly the role does change, obviously, because I don't think Williams and Aina are natural wing backs. Put it that way. I think that they can play wing back, but it's not a natural role for them.
Weren't you being linked with buying three players for Botafogo? So
Yeah,
Jair Cunha's come in, obviously Igor Jesus, who people may particularly remember from the Club World Cup scoring against Paris Saint-Germain. But it was a third, a left back, wasn't there?
yeah. Whose name escapes me now, but
Same.
he's definitely. I mean, I did a research into him, and he was definitely the kind of Nuno Tavares mold in that very athletic, very strong going forward. Devastating in the opposition's half, but question marks about their defending in the defensive half. So I think that type of profile of fullback could be what we look at. Someone very athletic, someone who can get forward and offer a threat, who perhaps isn't as solid going, in his own half. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do that just to give us the option to go wing backs on occasions. Yes.
Yeah, a left back feels a certainty because obviously Harry Toffolo's gone, Alex Moreno's gone back to Aston Villa as well. Is there, for those who want to go Williams, is there any concern in that? That it could be
I
someone comes in and becomes like a more natural left footer to play that side as a first choice.
Possibly, but Williams has been an outstanding player for us over the latter part of last season. And I think he's only getting better. I think we're looking at one of the best young fullbacks in the Premier League here in Nico Williams. I think after this season, he's going to be another one that we're going to have people are going to come looking for. I think he's potentially a top six side fullback. So I don't have any question marks over him playing the majority of the season unless we make a surprisingly strong acquisition in that role, who comes in and who can better him. I just don't see it though.
Jesus obviously come in. Is that competition to Wood? Could they play together? And already, Mark, I have to say from what you said so far, Chris Wood is currently sitting in my team, and I'm already thinking about taking him out.
Yeah, I think long term, if we are going to play different styles, then Chris Wood's minutes, maybe not his starts, will be under threat. The other player you got to factor in here is Tyler Aroney, which I never thought I'd be even mentioning him in this episode, other than to say, well, eventually he'll be shipped out. But from what I've seen pre-season, he's made a miraculous recovery, not only to get back on the pitch, but to actually look like he's back to something like his sharpest form in terms of his movement and pace, something like we saw in the first couple of seasons from him. So I wouldn't discount him being a factor as well, because it gives us three players who are very different in the way they play. You've got the pace and strength, the direct play from Tawarani when we need it. We've got the marksmanship and the guile and movement in the box of a Chris Wood. And then you've got Jesus, who offers us a lot more movement in the channels and link up play and hold up play, as the third option. If we're going to evolve into a team that are possession based and we get in match situations where we've got to break a team down, Jesus will be on the pitch, I think. The question marks will be, will he be on the pitch for Chris Wood or will he be on the pitch with Chris Wood? That's the question. So I think you can start with Chris Wood and be pretty secure in the fact that he's going to play the opening games for sure. But I think that Jesus is going to have an impact when he's on the pitch. And then there'll start to be questions about, does he start over Chris Wood in some games? Yes.
So I'll tell you what I'm looking at, Mark, from my personal perspective at the moment. I'm potentially looking at free hitting in game week 2 when you go to Palace.
Right.
I can afford to bench him in game week 4 when you go to Arsenal. And I'm also conscious that's after an international break as well. I don't know what New Zealand are doing at that stage, but we have seen that. I think actually at Arsenal last year, I want to say he didn't start after an international break. And that's
Yeah,
also, it's an early, am I right in saying it's an early kickoff as well,
probably
Arsenal,
is. Yeah.
Arsenal
Yeah.
away.
12:30. Yeah.
So I'm looking at Brentford at home, West Ham at home, Burnley away, Sunderland at home, sell.
Yeah, that's sound. I think that's pretty sound. Yeah. I think getting Chris Wood for the West Ham Brentford home games and the two promoted teams with the option to be able to bench him for Arsenal is a very, very good scenario. I think Chris Wood can get you 3 or 4 goals over that run between game weeks 1 and 6. I'd be a lot more confident about that if we had got more players in and Nuno had more time of Ndoye and we had more encouragement in pre-season. But if we can get 2 or 3 in before, the first couple of games, then I definitely think Chris Wood can get you return for that investment over that time. Yes.
Okay. And Elliot Anderson
Yeah.
has certainly caught the attention. I've seen a lot of content creators pushing this narrative. 5.5, likely to be one of the best for DEFCONs in midfield. And obviously, unlike many of the others, capable of a few attacking returns as well. How interesting is this, Mark?
Yeah, I think he is of interest. I'm really pleased that DEFCON has arrived to bring these players into the conversation. That was the idea. The idea was like, let's start to get the likes of Caicedo and Anderson and Xhaka and players like that. Xhaka's come back into the Premier League and people are looking at him. If Paulina does go to Spurs and there's speculation about that, he'll be another one. He's going to be
I ain't
that.
counting any chickens now, am I,
Oh,
Mark?
no, fair enough. But when he was at Fulham, he was absolutely devastating for
But
DEFCON. He would have been, 70% of games, I think he got it in. So it's great that we can talk about Anderson and players of that ilk in this light because they are great footballers. They are at what they do, they are amongst the best. And there's no question that Elliot Anderson is, in his age group, an exceptional central midfielder. So it's great that we're talking about him in FPL terms because that's the way it should be, right? So that's the first thing I'll say. Absolutely, yeah. He will step up again this year. He's only going to get better, and I think he's one of the most complete young footballers in the Premier League, no question. I think that I absolutely love him. When he arrived at Forest, I was saying I'd looked into him before because when he was at Newcastle, I had my eye on him and thought if he ever breaks in that Newcastle team, he's going to be a cheap FPL option, and he can do bits. He's definitely going to be an option. So when he arrived at Forest, I was like, yeah, don't worry, we've got a good player here, and he's turned out to be just that. And I think he'll flourish even more. Could be on some set pieces as well because we need someone. If Louise doesn't come in, then I think Anderson's going to be taking some set pieces. So, yeah, I definitely endorse looking at him as he's one of the better 5-5 options for sure. Yeah,
do you think he'll be yours?
he's been in and out of my team, definitely. Yeah, so it really depends on what I do with my structure. Whether if I've got Salah in my midfield, then I probably will get a 5-5 in midfield as well. And Anderson's definitely in the top three for me in terms of players in that bracket.
Okay. Can I have a stab at your best 11? I think goalkeeper and back four, I don't need to say, but are we looking
Yeah,
at Sangari, Anderson, Gibbs-White in front of that, Hudson Odoi, Ndoye, and Wood as it
yeah, that,
stands?
that that's the best 11. I don't think that's good enough because I think that Sangare is badly exposed in that lineup because you play that midfield three of Anderson, Gibbs White, and Sangare's got people running at him at regular intervals, and that is where he struggles. Sangare has shown in pre-season how good he is with the ball. He's a very gifted technical player. He's got the physical prowess when opponents have got their back to goal. He can go into duels like in that scenario. But when you've got runners coming at him, he is almost woeful.
Is that
It,
not maybe to play someone like Yates instead under that circumstance?
Possibly, but Yates isn't technically good enough to play the way Nuno wants to play, I don't think. So Dominguez is the closest we've got, but he's not fit. And I think what we saw last season at the end was Sangari played well when we had Dominguez on one side. When we didn't have Hudson Odoi fit and we were playing Elanga one side, Dominguez the other, and Dominguez was able to tuck in and provide a bit of legs in midfield, which meant that Sangare wasn't as exposed as often. But if you don't have that, if you're playing with two wide men in Ndoye and Hudson Odoi, then just realised how annoying that is. Then you're
Cho.
gonna, yeah, yeah, you're gonna have, you're gonna have situations where people are regularly running at Sangare, and people go past Sangare with ease. And for me, that means I don't think he can play that role long term, which is why we're looking at Douglas Luiz, because I'm pretty certain that is to replace Sangare in that role. I like Sangare as a footballer, and I think in Europe he will play most games. And in matches where you've got the ball, and in matches where you're not, with 30% possession and the opponent is swarming over you, and you've got a counter attack, then he'll be okay and he can do a job. But I just don't think he's got the physical prowess in terms of his pace and ability to keep pace with Premier League runners in midfield to play the sixth role in our team.
Good stuff, Mark. Thank you very much for your insights as ever, my friend. Good luck for the season ahead. Anything you want to plug before we finish, mate?
No, not anymore. Apart from Forest
You can
Focus.
plug it. Go on. They're still your mates. Go on.
Yeah, I Forest Focus, of course, is I'll be on regularly over the season. Although I've not been on recently because I've been far too negative about Forest pre-season, and so I've kept myself out of the firing line there.
Should we listen to them if we want Forest
If you
positivity
want
then?
Forest, yeah, Forest positivity, go and listen to Forest Focus. They're a bit more up on Forest, I think, than myself. But obviously, I've still got to give a shout out to FPL Black Box and Az, who've got Luke and Andy recruited this season, and they've started very strongly, and it's great to see. So please go and go give your time to them as well. And yeah, so it's a novelty for me not to be able to plug any FPL content. Well, I can't.
You are missed, but you'll keep seeing Mark here on this channel throughout the season. One last question: where do you think you finish?
Uh, if Gibbs-White was going, I could see us being in the bottom six. I think we'll just be outside that 13th, 14th.
I think if you keep the squad fit, Mark, and you add a few additions, which I don't have much doubt that you will do, I think you'll still be in and around close to top half because I think the spine of your team with the keeper, Murillo, Milenkovic, Anderson, Gibbs-White is really strong, mate.
Mm. Yeah, we got to be fortunate with injuries though for that to happen. I think if we get the luck that we had last year and those players you mentioned all stay fit, then yeah, we could possibly push into top 10. I do think the rigours of European football shouldn't be underestimated though, and I think we're going to have to play some of that spine in those games, and I think that will take its toll. So that's why I'm being a bit more pessimistic, I think.
Unless Crystal Palace win their appeal. And Roy McLaughlin-Dowd is still to come on Correspondent Week later today. Next up, though, is Jack Turner talking Burnley and their horrendous start to the season from a fixture perspective, but a couple of extremely interesting enablers to cover off. Mark, thank you very much, mate. Good luck for the season. Cue music, please, man child.